Order. Welcome to the Public Accounts Committee on Monday the 19th of January 2026. Today, the committee returns to one of its most high-profile areas of scrutiny, the asylum system. So in 24/5, the Home Office directly spent around £4 billion on asylum support, including £2.7 billion on accommodation, while more than 109,000 asylum claims were lodged, the highest on record. The government announced an entirely new asylum model in November 25, alongside plans to reduce costs by £1 billion per year by 28/9. Previous PAC reports on this subject have highlighted recurring issues, including the absence of sustained whole system oversight, weak financial management, and the risks of short-term interventions that do not consider the system-wide impacts. Persistent backlogs also remain a challenge, leaving individuals remaining in the system for extended periods, in turn driving cost increases and creating uncertainty for local authorities as well as asylum seekers themselves. So today we will therefore be looking to test the department's readiness to implement the new system model, assess how government is addressing fundamental barriers and building system capacity. We will also be looking to examine how departments are improving data quality and collaboration across the asylum system and evaluate the realism and value for money of savings plans and accommodation plans. So today we are very pleased to have a very senior panel with us, starting with the Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Justice, Dr. Joe Farrar. Joe, would you like to introduce yourself? And then we also have the second Permanent Secretary, Simon Ridley, from the Home Office. Perhaps each of you could introduce yourselves and your teams. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I'm Joe Farrar, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Justice. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm here with Emma Churchill, who's the Director General for Policy in the Ministry of Justice. We're also joined by Josh, who's Director in MHCLG, who's responsible for this policy area. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Simon Ridley, Second Permanent Secretary at the Home Office, and here as Accounting Officer for the Migration and Borders System in the Home Office, which obviously includes Asylum as part of that system. And I'm joined by Rannia Leontaridi, who is the Director General for the new Asylum Group.
So a warm welcome to all of you, but especially to Dr. Rannia and Josh, as I believe this is your first times in this committee. So welcome especially. And I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our guest member for today's session, Paul Kohler, who is joining us from the Home Affairs Select Committee. You're very welcome, Paul. So let us make a start, and that falls to me. And so I think probably to you, Simon, if I may, please. How will you ensure that the implementation of the new asylum model takes a whole system approach rather than repeating the reactive fixes to parts of the system seen in recent years?
Thank you, Chair. And the first thing to say is that I'm in this role, Accounting Officer for Migration and Borders. I have responsibility for the whole of the Migration and Borders system. As you say, over the last few years, there have been some significant policy, not least, and totally inexplicably, as a result of the general election, where all the work we've been doing on the partnership with Rwanda and third country removals, the Illegal Migration Act, was not taken forward by the current government, and we have been implementing a series of changes on a systemic basis since then. We've learned the first thing to say is we've learned a lot of lessons from work we have done before. So to take an example, we cleared an initial decision backlog in 2023, but for a number of reasons, including some of the previous government's policy, that asylum backlog grew back, but nonetheless, we had established new practices in the asylum decision-making team, which we have continued into backlog clearance this year. We have also, as part of that, been working much more closely with colleagues in the MOJ and elsewhere in government, because we're very clear that clearing the initial decision backlog is not the end in itself. It is part of the system, and to get the whole system under control, we need to look at it in that way. So as well as building on the lessons learned, with Dame Antonia Romeo as our permanent secretary, we have put in place, and she has set out for this committee, a lot of changes we are making in the department as part of the future Home Office to improve how we clarify and strengthen accountabilities, how we focus on financial efficiency, delivery, and all of that is to make sure that we can make changes. To sharpen those accountabilities, we've made organisational changes in the department, and that is what the most important of those for this hearing is the creation of the new Asylum group, which Rannia
We'll be coming on to that.
might come in to lead, and that puts Rannia in the position where, as well as the formation of that group, we have moved more of the functions, both operationally of the asylum system and in terms of policy and commercial capability, into Rannia's group. She is continuing to develop that so that she can then lead across the system, both in the Home Office, but also more broadly with the Ministry of Justice, with local authorities and elsewhere.
Some really helpful opening remarks. Just one simple quick question from me before I hand over to Rupert Lowe. Do you know what the backlog is today?
So we do. The last published figures were in September 2025, and Rannia, have you got the 80,000? But that is a number that is that had come down significantly by the end of September and continues to come down. And for example, we have got far fewer cases in the system. So at the end of September 2025, there were 16,593 cases that had been in there for over a year. That compared to 30,637 a year earlier. And those numbers continue to fall.
How often do you publish those figures?
We publish figures quarterly in our immigration statistics. The next quarterly publication will be on the 26th of February. Data up to the end of December.
Okay. Rupert Lowe, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think my question is for Simon Ridley, who I see, Simon, you, from your CV, you've been involved in other national challenges such as COVID-19 and the Brexit situation, and you've been here doing this since 23. So you obviously have a great deal of knowledge about it. I mean, when I read this report, and I'm not sure I quite understood fully your response to the chairman. I mean, when the NAO say to achieve value for money in its management of asylum, the government needs to coordinate and manage across the complex end-to-end system.
Rupert, sorry to stop you. Could you just tell us the paragraph on the page?
That is in the summary in the NAO report, paragraph 5.
Okay. Okay.
So, in my experience of running businesses don't work when they're in silos. And it strikes me that government is operating in silos. It furthermore strikes me that this is now a national emergency. So I would like to know, as part of this committee, what exactly you're going to do to ensure that all departments work together. There is a cross-governmental approach to this national crisis, and that the committee can feel that there is actually something being done to deliver value for taxpayers' money.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lowe. So the first thing to say is we really welcome this report, not just in the Home Office, but more broadly in government, because exactly as you say, it looks at the issue in a systemic way, not just a specific reform or a specific issue. Secondly, I am really clear and really conscious that the asylum system has been under enormous pressure for a long time. A set of changes and a set of issues that took place at the end of the last decade and through COVID meant that the government has been spending far too much on the asylum system, and we have been working incredibly hard over recent years to bring those costs down, and indeed last financial year into the one currently running, we saved £700 million against Home Office spending, and we have got very significant savings targets in the spending review. We will only meet those if we are working in an end-to-end way. We have to get the right balance between real clarity on accountability for delivering change with the collaboration that is needed. So the change we've made internally is to create a specific asylum group, which Rannia is leading. And so Rannia is building not just the capability we need in the Home Office, but the boards and governance that we need across Whitehall to work with other departments, because we will only solve this problem if we can address the pressures not just in Home Office decision making, but in the appeal system. If we need to change the wider legislative and legal frameworks that enable people who want to frustrate the system and to frustrate removal. We've moved more resources into removals through immigration enforcement, so that we have been driving removals up, and we can continue to drive removals up. And then we need to be working with people beyond government, local authorities being a prime example.
So you have got a plan for the justice system to work with the Home Office, to work with basically local authorities. That's all underway, and there is a blueprint for that which is going to be delivered on behalf of the British people. Is that what you're telling me?
So yes, and if I mean, just to take the justice system and the appeal system, and Joe and Emma might want to say more. We've approached this in stages, so that we can make progress in the short term, but build a long-term sustainable solution. So we are already in the Home Office supporting MOJ and including financially to increase capacity through both judicial recruitment and increasing the capacity in the legal aid system. Through the Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Act, there are changes in there which put statutory timetables on hearing appeals, and we are doing a lot of joint work to implement that, including improving data sharing. And then we have committed through the statement the Home Secretary made in the autumn to long-term sustainable reform through a new appeals body, which will require legislation and further change, so we can build the capacity in the short term to meet the immediate emergency pressures that we have got, but we need to build a longer-term sustainable solution.
I think that's got to be a priority, but what concerns me is when I use my parliamentary office to ask questions of the Home Office on these issues, on virtually every occasion I get, the Home Office does not hold the information sought in these questions at the level of granularity requested. And that's for information packs, recreational activities provided, cleaning services, franchising and furnishing and decorating, antisocial behaviour. A whole raft of questions that I ask, I get that answer. So that worries me. If you haven't got the granularity of data, you won't be able to manage the situation. And that particularly pertains to the subcontractor or the contractor contracts that you've got with people like Serco, Mears and other national providers who are providing asylum services to you. Basically, I've been to see the Minister. I have asked many parliamentary questions. I've drilled down. I find that there are contracts where hotel rooms have been fully paid for, i.e. the entire hotel's been taken and yet it's half full. I think there's a lack of knowledge and understanding of these complex contracts, both within the ministerial departments and also within your departments. So, from the point of view of the taxpayer, if the private sector is indulging in very complex contracts which you're signing that aren't fit for purpose, then taxpayer money is going to be wasted massively. So again, I'd like to know, can we have complete transparency of what's in these contracts? When I ask the questions, I get that's a redacted version.
Okay.
So
I think, Rupert, we've got the message.
No, but Jeffrey, it's very important that we've got to have transparency on this if we are to get to the bottom of it. And I don't think we have transparency. And I think we haven't got transparency because very often the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing.
Right. Shall I come in from Ministry of Justice because you were asking about the whole system, and we can talk about the detail maybe a bit later, but just to support what Simon's saying, actually we recognise that there needs to be a different approach to not just asylum but the whole criminal justice system and the way that we work together and the way that we lead that system as a collective, not as distinct processes. And, that's not to take away from staff who are working really hard on the front line on various parts of the system, and we should thank them for everything they do. But as leaders, working across the system is really important. That's why we're welcoming the NAO report, which is one of the first to look across the system. I think that's extremely helpful. But my role as Permanent Secretary of MOJ is to make sure that we do jointly own the system. We use data together, so we have shared management information so that we can take decisions that we all agree with, and that we all take stewardship of the system. So we'll be doing some more thinking about how we do that and how we continue to do that. But there's some good examples that Simon's already mentioned, some of them today, but you'll pick up on some of the work we're doing around digital and data, around the new appeals body that you'll want to talk about, as Simon said, around judicial recruitment, which shows much better join-up across the system. So I feel confident that we are entering into a different way of working, which I hope reassures the committee, but I'm sure you will want to pick up on some of the detail as we move through.
Chair, if I may, I'll give a very short response, because we may come back to some of these things, to the things Mr. Lowe mentioned, because as we've talked about at this committee and indeed others, there have been significant challenges with how the accommodation system has developed over many. It's built on contracts that were signed in 2019. The use of hotels came much later and was not at that point intended. To the point on, and we have done a lot in the department to strengthen our contract management and our commercial functions to support the scrutiny of that, and as a result have got money back for the taxpayer. We also, the Home Affairs Select Committee did a very long report into all of these issues, including into the detail of the contracts. And one of the things we have been doing in recent months is again, the Permanent Secretary requested an external review of our commercial functions in this area, so we can get further challenge and make sure that we are continuing to develop our capability as best we can.
We'll let Rupert maybe come back if he wants to a little later on, but I think we must make a bit of progress and then come back. So, Catherine, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just listening to the opening comments from both you, Simon, and Joe, there does seem to be great store set by the new Asylum group and what it's going to be able to achieve. It would be really helpful to understand a bit more detail about what the specific role and responsibilities of that group are. How big a group are we talking about? What does this look like in practice? And in what way does it differ from the Asylum Task Force that came before it?
I'll say something and then Rannia may want to follow. So the way we were organised prior to last summer, there was a DG-led group, it's called the Customer Services Group, which was responsible essentially for our large caseworking operations. So it's responsible for passports and visa services, as well as resettlement, asylum, etc. With the enormous focus on the need for asylum reform to bring down costs, to meet the government's priority to exit hotels, we decided that we needed to have a group that was entirely focused on the challenges in the asylum system, so to clarify accountability. But we also have brought a number of other teams into that group, so that it's now got the operational teams responsible for all of the end-to-end of the asylum system, so all of the intake units where asylum seekers come in and apply for asylum, through to the handover to immigration enforcement for removals. But as well as the operational teams, we've also brought in policy teams and a larger commercial team so that those functions are there. And what that does is that, so the asylum group is responsible for meeting our asylum objectives, so exiting hotels, hitting the savings targets, implementing the changes in the Home Secretary's statement. But alongside that kind of clarity of accountability, we also need to build the governance, the mechanisms to manage supply and demand, and to have wider system governance. And Rannia can say more about all of that.
Okay, I'm hoping that Rannia will be able to paint a bit of a clearer picture, because that sounds like a whole government department from what you've just described, or the sound of.
Good place.
Well, yeah, but so it's hard to understand exactly what this group is going to do. Rannia, if you could explain.
Yes, of course. So this new group, so I came into the department 2 months ago. I found the NAO report incredibly helpful because it started talking about a complex system that asylum is, and it reflected the challenges and the opportunities that I have ahead of me. My responsibility is to manage end-to-end the asylum system, and as Simon said, that means people entering the country requesting asylum through all the processing centres around the country that we have, dealing with the decisions. Then asylum seekers move into accommodation, so I'm looking after the contracts and how that proceeds in the future. And then, of course, coming to that, for that all to happen, I have responsibility for the policy and the strategy. So when we look across the system of the asylum as a whole, it's the first time that we can see this end-to-end approach. To manage that, the team, as you asked, is around 10,000 people. The majority of them are in the operations. And, of course, we manage a significant number of large contracts. But to address the question around how do you manage across the whole of government, I did 2 things upon my arrival. The first one is I focused on the internal governance of the department. So I have line of accountability, building assurance from the top to the bottom. So I know people's responsibilities, the risks they manage, the assurance that they need to put in place in terms of quality, speed of decisions, etc. And across government, we built for the first time a board that we call the Asylum System Board that met earlier in the month. And the responsibility of the board is to bring together relevant departments, the ones you see here, as well as number 10, Treasury and others, to agree to common priorities, common risks and challenges, manage the trade-offs and understand the decisions we need to make, very much as you would do, as Joe said earlier, in a systems approach of leadership. And of course, we have the usual committees, that ministerial committees or cabinet office committees that we will use for escalation, such as the new one that has been created, the Borders and Security Committee.
That's really helpful, thank you. That did create a clearer picture. But clearly there are big challenges for the Home Office, which is where the vast majority of the group of which is comprised. But that job of coordinating with the Ministry of Justice and with communities and local government is really important, and that's one of the aspects that the NAO report really highlights is lacking. So it'd be good to hear from you, how is it going in terms of that cross-government coordination? And do you have the levers and the budget to be able to influence not just what's happening within your group, within the Home Office, but right across government to make sure all those right levers are pulled?
The board that we put together across government was pretty much an inspiration that came from the NAO report. We do have the financial capacity to deliver the outcomes that ministers expect of us. We have some significant work to do in areas as NAO highlights, including data, exiting hotels, managing speedier decisions as well as high-quality decisions. But what I'm absolutely clear about is that building together the departments, or bringing together the departments, we can jointly achieve that. There have been good examples of where the predecessor to this, the task force as we called it, came together for a specific purpose in assessing large sites and co-located departments within the Cabinet Office to try and do that. And we saw some significant progress, which I'm sure we will talk about later on how you manage large sites, considering the planning, the money, the people, the kind of issues you faced around social cohesion, etc. And I think that was the predecessor to what we're trying to achieve here. We will update and continue to learn lessons as we progress, and I hope that the board is what we expect it to be and do.
Really helpful.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Clive Betts, my excellent deputy.
Right. It's probably to Joe Farrar, this question, but you no doubt tell me if that's the right person to come to. There've been a lot of concerns about the efforts to reduce the number of people in the asylum system, particularly at first stage, getting decisions on the initial applications made quicker, but then that has pushed more numbers down into the appeal system where there have been blockages. So the government's indicated that there will be a new independent appeals body. Could you just tell us a little bit more about it? And will it be the Ministry of Justice that's responsible for that body?
The body will be a Home Office body, and Simon might want to tell you a bit more about it, if it's helpful, because it won't come into force straight away. I can tell you some of the things we're doing in the Ministry of Justice to exactly speed up the appeal system, and then maybe I'll hand over to Simon to tell you a bit more about the new body. But we recognise that as cases come downstream, that we need to put greater investment into judicial recruitment, for example. We were just talking about the Home Office power to give funding to other government departments. We were really grateful for 29 million from the Home Office, which has allowed us to sit, or judges to sit, to hear cases for an additional 6,500 days. We're putting a lot of investment into judicial recruitment because we recognise that the new body won't come into place straight away, and even if it does, all cases that are lodged will need to be heard in the by the judiciary. So we have already introduced 61 new fee-paid judges, 25 salaried judges. They began sitting this quarter. Recruitment for up to another 70 fee-paid judges started in September, and 30 salaried judges in October. They will all come. They will all begin sitting this year. Application numbers for those posts have been healthy, so we're putting a huge amount of effort into judicial recruitment. We're also working with retired judges to see who can come and sit in the asylum tribunal, and generally authorising other judges to sit in a different tribunal so they can come and work in the asylum tribunal. So there's a lot going on in terms of judicial recruitment, and also in terms of productivity, which I can talk about a bit later, in view of the fact that actually, even though we are having a new appeals body, it won't come into force straight away, and we will still have this backlog.
Perhaps Simon Ridley can tell us when it will come into force to be.
Yeah, so I mean, so exactly as Joe says, and all the work the tribunal is doing is absolutely vital. But the judgment the government has made is that we need to build more longer-term sustainable capacity to manage asylum appeals in the long term. The timetable for change, so we're going to require some legislation to set up the new body. So the ultimate timetable will be dependent on that, on the timetable for that legislation, and then recruitment. So there'll be a really important phased transition from all the work that the tribunal will be doing for a good period of time before we've got the new body up, but we don't at the moment have a precise delivery date for the new body. It's dependent on a number of things that we need to pin down.
Can you give us any indication as to when you'd like it to be in place?
Well, we'd like it to be in place as soon as possible. But there are a set of decisions that need to be made about the timetable for legislation, the time that legislation will
Are you already planning for it? Are you thinking about how you're going to recruit the staff for it?
Yes, absolutely. We're doing all the planning work in parallel, both in terms of the planning for the body, for the recruitment. We are going to need to set the body up in accordance with the Cabinet Office public bodies rules. We need to get the independence with the Home Office, from the Home Office, right in the short term. The other thing that I would say is that the reform is not just about the creation. The creation of the body is really critical in terms of the capacity, but there are also a set of other changes that we are working through on the policy side to make sure that all issues and submissions are brought forward as far as possible, so that we don't get into, so that we can get out of sort of recurring appeals and further submissions, which lead to the process taking much longer. So we want to tighten the end-to-end process as well as build the capacity.
So work is going on. What is the timescale to get that work in place? Presumably creating appointments who are going to come in and run the new bodies when they're created?
Yes. So I mean, we have a program team in the Home Office that we have we have built, as you would expect, that is working on all of these issues and working to ministers, that is designing the operational planning, the organisational planning, and the necessary legislation. We will need to get decisions on those and move all of those forward in parallel over the coming months.
And you talk about the issue of getting a more streamlined approach to appeals, getting all the information there at the beginning of the process. Will that not need legislation as well?
Yes. So there's so I mean, to as the NAO report sets out, we need to look at this end to end. To the chair's first question, one of the reasons that I am more confident we can get to a set of reforms that are sustainable and do look at things as an end-to-end system is that the Asylum and Returns policy statement that the Home Secretary published at the end of last year looks at the system from end to end. It's not just a plan for a set of discrete reforms and parts of the system. It is about how do we reduce inflow, how do we make our processing through both Home Office decision-making and the appeals system quicker, both by looking at how we can bring information and claims forward, as well as building capacity, all the way through to a lot of ongoing dedicated work to increase the number of returns. And so that kind of end-to-end thinking is underpinning what we are doing. But a lot of it will need legislation. Not all of it. Some will need primary, some will need secondary, some we're getting on with.
So the Permanent Secretary just talked about cases already in the existing appeal system would stay there. Yeah. How do you deal with cases in the existing system where they then lodge a further appeal or want to submit, put a new application in? Do they stay within the existing system or do they go into the new system when it's established?
So we are at the moment in the process of designing what will need to be a phased transition from the tribunal through to the new body, both in terms of the sort of timing of that transition and sort of which cases transition in which way. But that is work that we are doing.
Yes, we need to work quite a lot of this through. We know there'll be a considerable period of dual running where both the new body and the old system are running in parallel. But some of the ways that they work together and when cases pass from one system to another needs to be worked through.
Should I just say a bit more, because the board that Rannia was talking about earlier, which she is going to chair, of which will be from different departments, members of that board. This is an excellent example of a kind of set of detailed planning that can't be done just within one department. It needs to be done collectively across departments, because as the Home Office proceed with the work to establish the new independent appeals body, we'll have to work together on a plan of transition. As Joe was just saying, a very considerable period we expect of dual running, because it will be the case that cases that have been lodged with the first tier tribunal will stay with the first tier tribunal, but we don't anticipate a kind of big bang transition. We don't anticipate a single day where cases cease to be lodged with the first tier tribunal and all of them start being lodged with the new appeals body. We imagine that we will want to start slowly with the new appeals body and for an increasing number of case types to be heard over time. So that only will work if there is detailed joint planning across the two departments to work through case types and volumes.
We're going to just have to have slightly shorter responses, otherwise we're going to be here till midnight. I've got a question which I'm going to ask you now, Joe, please, if I may, and then I'm going to bring in Tris, and then I'm going to bring in our guest, Paul Kohler. So my question is this. The NAO have done an excellent comparison with various European countries, how their systems work. And it does seem, reading that I can't see any of them allow the amount of multiple appeals that we do in this country. And I'm just wondering, with this new body, whether you are going to take any statutory measures to try and reduce multiple appeals. And what I have in mind is this, that you beef up the legal aid system so that appellants can get their case right first time. All the evidence is assembled first time. And it seemed to me if you did that, you would eliminate a lot of the multiple cases. There will still be a need for further appeals where the rules change, countries change, and so on. But actually, it does seem to me you need to cut that number down.
Yeah, and particularly on legal aid, we recognise that the legal aid system is going to think carefully about the new appeals body and how it. So we're working closely with the Home Office on that. We're already thinking quite carefully about legal aid, how we monitor the number of providers, how we provide the right advice in the right places, so that we minimise the number of appeals. So completely take your point, Chair, and that's some of the things we've had a hearing on legal aid that that we've been thinking about anyway. But I don't know if someone wants to pick up.
And just very quickly, as I said, we are also looking in policy terms at how we make sure all matters are dealt with up front in a single appeal. And so, you can't make a set of appeals on different matters in series, and if things are brought up late, there will need to be a very strong justification for that.
Thank you. Tris.
Just very briefly, and apologies, this wasn't... you mentioned a board. I can't see any reference to a board here, so this is something which is not in the report. Could we have some detail about who is a member of this board that you've referenced, and could you submit that to us as evidence, perhaps? Because I'm not seeing reference to the board here. I appreciate it might be new since this NAO report, but can you give us some clarity on who this board...
Not now, but if you could let us have a note, please, Simon, would be really helpful. The composition of the board, what its governance arrangements are, and what it's actually intended to do. Would be really helpful. Thank you, Chris. Tris, you read my mind on that. I was going to ask for that later. So, Paul Kohler, please, warm welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I'm due to ask about value for money, and as 80% of the cost of asylum are on accommodation, I want to focus on accommodation, relying not just on the NAO's analysis, but also their previous report on the accommodation contracts. Now, in that previous report, they said, one understatement, data from suppliers suggest that hotels may be more profitable than other forms of accommodation. Now, as we discovered, they can be up to 8 times more profitable, because they were cost-plus contracts. The higher the base cost, the higher the permitted profit. So what is the Home Office doing to move on from these cost-plus contracts?
So the government is really clear. Its priority is to exit hotels, and that is where we are focused. So we, as you know, the peak of hotels back in July 23 was 400 hotels in use. We are now under 200. And one of the ways in which we made the 700 million saving that I mentioned earlier is by coming out of hotels. Alongside that, again we've discussed before, is we have put a lot more capacity into our commercial teams and contract monitoring teams on the asylum contracts to strengthen the way in which we work with our providers and the way we make sure that we are getting best value for money from the contracts that we have got. And last year we clawed back £46 million of excess profit, as well as about £28 million of other contractual matters. So we're tightening up how we monitor, how we manage the contracts at the moment. But fundamentally, to answer your question, we need to exit hotels.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen straight away. So on the actual contracts, the break clause is coming up in a couple of months' time. Are you thinking about exercising the break clause then and renegotiating new contracts on the hotel accommodation?
So we are focused, as I said, on exiting hotels. That will take us back to the core contracts as they were in 2019. There is a break clause in those contracts, as you have said. That is in September this year. But we are we don't. If we're going to exercise the break clause, we don't have to do it at that point. The break clause is any point after September.
Indeed, it's a rolling one. Yes,
with 9 months' notice up to 2029. So we will focus on exiting hotels. We are continuing to work with our suppliers. We are also
Your suppliers have a huge incentive not to go out of hotels because they make so much profit from them.
Yeah.
So as much as you want to work with them, there's a real issue there.
Rannia may want to say more, but they are working very closely with us on the work.
Sure, that's what they're saying, but they have no desire to succeed, do they?
Well, we are getting the numbers of hotels down. We are getting the cost down. The government is really clear that is our policy direction and one of the priorities we have got for the asylum system, and we will work with our suppliers and with others to deliver on that. I mean, we are also engaging the market in terms of the future and future accommodation needs, but our focus is to get out of hotels precisely to drive down those costs.
But the numbers in hotels is not going down, is it? You've got out of the number of hotels, but the numbers
in hotels are going down. It was a bit to the point I think the chair made earlier. So the last published figure was September 2025. The next published figure will show a reduction in the numbers in hotels.
The numbers went up from 24 to 25, didn't they, in hotels?
Yes. The numbers sort of came down and then it went up a bit again because we had unfortunately an unacceptably high number of arrivals into the illegal migration last.
The point I'm trying to drill down into...
Doing a number of things to reduce our reliance on hotels, increasing the utilisation rate in other accommodation, moving into some large sites, doing a number of things to bring down the
point I'm trying to drill down to is that you're not going to get out of hotels anytime soon in reality. You have contracts that were wholly inappropriate and gave huge excessive profits with providers keeping asylum seekers in hotels. Why are we not exercising the break clause and bringing in new contracts for the hotels?
Yeah.
May I add something? One clarification. So we can exit hotels without exercising the break clause. So we can exit hotels anytime without the exercising of the break clause.
You're not going to be able to. You're not going to be able to because you're not going to get enough dispersal accommodation. You're going to have hotel accommodation. You need to change the contract. That's the crucial thing.
So we are absolutely focused on exiting hotels. We are also increasing, as I've said, have increased our commercial capacity and capability to manage our contracts more tightly and increase increase the value for money we can get from them. We are looking at in a number of ways at how we can broaden the way in which we deliver asylum accommodation. We brought a fourth supplier in for some of what we are delivering, but we need to work with the contracts we've got in the short run, and we will make decisions about the break clause when we are in a position so to do. In the meantime, nothing stops us reducing.
Why not renegotiate a new hotel contract? Exercise the break clause, renegotiate a new hotel contract. You know that the permitted profits are obscene when they're in hotels because the base cost is so much higher, the permitted profit is so much higher. Surely you need to renegotiate the contract. And you could do that straight away by exercising the break clause on the current contract.
So, I mean, we are really focused on how we can get the best value we can from asylum accommodation and to make the savings that we need to, which we have successfully done in the last couple of years. And we are very focused on getting out of hotels so that we can reduce the challenges of asylum hotels, including the cost.
You've repeated that a number of times, but why not renegotiate the hotel contract?
We are working with our suppliers to make sure we can get the best out of the contract that we have got. We can exercise the break clause.
Cost plus contract is not a good sense. Cost plus contract is not good value for money, is it? Because it gives them obscene profits when they're in hotels. You know, why has Clearspring's profits gone up from £6,000 per employee to £300,000 per employee in a couple of years? Because they made obscene profits, because the cost plus contract is not appropriate when so many people are in hotels. What I don't understand is why you don't move the contracts. You're not going to get out of hotels anytime soon.
Well, our priority is to get out hotels as quickly as we can, and to continue to manage the contracts that we've got with our...
I'm going to stop you there, Simon, because we're not getting clear answers to Paul's very good questions. Can we have an absolute assurance from you that you will look at every single hotel contract? Because you're going to need some of them, the point that Paul was making, in the run-off before you get rid of all hotels. Can we have an absolute assurance that all hotel contracts will be looked at for value for money, and a notice will be served so that you can renegotiate those contracts? I don't want to be sitting here as a committee in a year's time with some dreadful case where somebody's made an obscene profit because you haven't reviewed it.
So we are looking at all of our contracts on with our suppliers on hotels and working with them on that. So yes, I can assure you of that. We have got an external review of our commercial and contract management capability on Asylum, which the Permanent Secretary asked for, which we will be responding to. We are making sure that we exercise the excess profit clauses that we have got in the current contracts, and we clawed back £46 million last year, and we are looking at how we take that forward. And we are looking at what the contractual options are for the future. So yes, Chair.
So the answer is...
We're also seeking to get hotels.
I'll just stop you there. The excess profits clause that you have in these contracts will enable you to do a retrospective look at some of these profit levels.
Yes.
Good. We're getting some.
But Chair, the point is, because the base cost is so high, they are permitted huge profits on those contracts. Huge profits. Can I check that when new contracts we do negotiate will not be cost-plus contracts?
Yeah, so we I mean, you've asked that question before, and yes, we will make sure that we are looking at the most value for money contracts.
Not cost-plus.
Because we are clear that the contracts signed in 2019 were not signed with the use of hotels.
So can I just bring Clive in very quickly on this?
Sorry, I think that's a very simple question, that new contracts would not be on the cost-plus basis. You didn't say they wouldn't be, you said you'd look at it.
Yeah, so we need to do the necessary market engagement and develop the contracts we need for the future of the accommodation system. We are not going to sign contracts that do not offer the taxpayer value for money as accounting.
Well, you have done in the past, haven't you?
Well, contracts signed in 2019.
Okay, simple question again. Do you accept the cost-plus basis for contracts is not a good value for the taxpayer?
That is in general true, yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
So why would any new contract have a cost-plus basis to it then?
Well, as I say, I don't expect that it will do.
Well, don't expect. Can we just give an assurance it won't?
Well, I mean, I can give you an assurance we will sign contracts that will be value for money for the taxpayer, and that makes that very unlikely. But we do not at the moment, we have not at the moment, developed all of that. I don't have a thing that I can tell you I will or won't recommend the signing of. But I'm not disagreeing with...
And you can hear the dissatisfaction of this committee. We will look at the transcript and your replies very carefully, but I suspect we will be coming back to this in our report. But for now, unless Lloyd, who's indicated he wants to ask something, is on this same subject or is it different, you're next.
It is on this subject, but just to move it forward, I mean, as Paul has very eloquently put forward, that the previous report by this committee did look at the poor management of large accommodation sites, which did lead to unacceptable levels of waste when it comes to public money. The recommendations of that report were accepted. So I just have some really simple questions around the progress that has been made since that report. Has the Home Office managed to successfully sell or transfer the HMP North Eye site and claw back any of the £15.4 million that was spent on a site that was never used?
We are looking at the best way to move the site on to get...
Have you sold it?
We have not yet. It's still in the Home Office's ownership, but we are looking at the best way to move it on to get the...
So coming up to 3 years on from the purchase, and where the site has been in no way used to house asylum seekers, no real success has been made to claw back that £15.4 million.
So we have done lots of work on that. We have not yet moved it on.
Okay, and then just secondly, another large accommodation site that we spent some time looking at in that previous Public Accounts Committee report was the Bibby Stockholm barge, where some £34.8 million was spent running that barge. Can you offer cast iron guarantees to my constituents who had to put up with that barge that an industrial level of waste of taxpayers' money, as was seen on scale there, will not be repeated as you move people out of hotels and into larger accommodation sites?
So, I mean, the Bibby Stockholm, as you know, successfully accommodated a number of...
I think I would use the word successful. I would say it was a...
Well, it was
public money.
Well, I think that's a matter of choice. It was used as alternative accommodation. It was successfully in operation.
But the NAO and this committee found that it was more expensive than other forms of accommodation. So I don't know how it could be successful.
So what we are doing now is looking at all the options we have got to exit hotels as quickly as possible. That is the priority.
But my concern there, Simon, is that, and this was what the previous Public Accounts Committee report said, was that actually there was a culture where things moved very, very quickly and key controls and processes were abandoned, and therefore value for the taxpayer was not paramount. So it sounds like that culture hasn't changed from the comments.
That's a different point. So we, as
rush to move, we have is not very reassuring.
Or the NAO and others have done a number of reports onto large sites, both specific and the previous programme in general. And we have learned a number of lessons from those reports, and we have put a large number of changes in place, both in terms of a number of things. Firstly, the sort of skills we've got in the department, in terms of work we're doing on large sites at the moment. As Rannia mentioned earlier, we've got an explicitly joint cross-government task force that brings in teams not just from the Home Office, but from the Ministry of Defence, from MHCLG to support on planning, Cabinet Office property, experts and others. We are spending much more time when we are looking at sites doing prior due diligence on those sites to make sure that we do not repeat some of the mistakes that we made on other on previous large sites. That doesn't mean that large sites can't bring value as a good alternative means of accommodation other than hotels for a whole series of reasons.
You can understand, and this is my final point on this, you can understand the concern of myself and I'm sure many other members of this committee, where when you have pursued large accommodation sites, such as the £15.4 million spent at North Eye in Bexhill-on-Sea and the £34.8 million that was squandered on the Bibby Stockholm barge, the litany of mistakes that have been made is huge. You haven't been able to claw back a significant amount of money with the barge, other than ending the contract and choosing not to renew it. And as you've already made clear to the committee today, there's been no success in clawing back the £15.4 million for North Eye either. So can you please offer us some reassurance that when you look at those two fiascos, it is not going to be repeated again as you seek to pursue and buy large accommodation sites?
So yes, I can, because we've learned we have learned a number of lessons across the department, and we have put a number of processes and new capabilities in place, as I've just described, in response to the NAO reports and other reports on this, as well as our own internal work. But just if I may, those are two very different issues. There's a set of challenges around Bexhill, which was a site that we bought and did not subsequently use, and there were the whole lot of things we put in place in terms of how we identify sites we could use that are very different from how they were done then, including how long it takes us. The Bibby Stockholm was a site that we paid for and we used as we had intended to use for the duration.
Not quite. It was evacuated because it was a serious fire risk and because Legionella was detected on board.
So there were a few weeks lost at the beginning. That is correct. But it was used as asylum accommodation in the way that it was intended until the end of the contract.
So, Simon, you can see why this committee is so sceptical about the Home Office procurement effort. Both in property, and when we did the RAF site in North Lincolnshire, I said that if we had produced that sort of assessment that the Home Office produced so far adrift, we would have been sued for negligence. The North Eye, which Lloyd has referred to, was one of the worst property advices that I've come across on this committee, and the procedures were not followed. So you can see why this committee is very sceptical on Home Office procurement so far, and that's why we've been so critical about the hotels issue. I was disappointed you weren't able to answer Lloyd's question on the North Eye, because I would have thought that was about the first question that this committee was likely to ask this afternoon. Indeed, had it not been asked by Lloyd, I was going to ask it. So could we have a note on the North Eye situation? On this committee's general theme of if you're going to fail, fail fast, surely you would want to get rid of that site and recoup at least some taxpayers' monies as soon as possible.
Yes, but we did. Sorry, it's not that I can't answer, it's that we haven't yet.
Well, we're many months on from that dreadful hearing and our report and the acceptance of the Treasury minute. I'd have thought you would have an answer by now, so I would be grateful for a note on that. Sarah, please, Sarah Green.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to move us on to unresolved cases and prolonged delays, if I may. The NAO report showed that more than a third, 41% of the asylum cases that they looked at in their sample were effectively stuck in limbo, where no action, no progress was being made on the claim, but they weren't being removed from the UK either. That's a sample size of 5,000. What's the actual number? How many people are effectively stuck in limbo in the system right now?
So, I mean, it depends, I think, exactly what you mean by cases that are in limbo.
The definition,
as I said earlier,
definition that the report uses is that they are a case remains open but are not awaiting an appeal decision or the outcome of further submissions to the Home Office. It's at the bottom of 2.12 on page 14 of the report. So their case remains open, but they're not awaiting an appeal decision or the outcome of further submissions to the Home Office. Their claims are not being progressed. These individuals have not been removed from the UK either. Are you able to...
So could you give me the reference in the...
Yeah, of course. It's page 14 and it's item 2.12. And effectively, the NAO had to pull together a sample to try and understand better and dig a little deeper. I'm curious to know if you have a number of that you're able to furnish the committee with on how many people are currently effectively in limbo.
So there are a number of cases that have been waiting an initial decision for a long period of time, which is 16,500. There's a number of people in the appeals queue, which Joe or Emma may want to say more about. And then you are right. There are a large number of people who are failed asylum seekers in the country. I don't have a number with me that adds all of those up.
Would you be able to share one with us in a note?
Right, shall I talk a bit about asylum appeals?
Yes,
I mean, they're not, I don't think they're particularly the cases you were talking about, but we know that the rise in caseload for asylum, I mean, if we take, there were 27,000 in April 24, it's now 70,000. That's the number of receipts we have into the system.
Not the individuals that the NAO are referencing.
No, not particularly, but we know that is a real issue. So we know that we have around 70,000.
Rannia can help you out.
Yeah, so we recognise the number that the NAO came up with. We worked closely, so we know there are 224,000 roughly individuals. They come from a mixed bag of cases. Some of them are appeals, some of them are further submissions. Happy to look at the breakdown. Some of them are cases that have been stuck in the system with delays that pertain to bad health or cases that cannot be progressed. And that sort of makes up the 224,000.
Is that today or?
This is from the point of time that the NAO report was done. We will publish further statistics that you can defer that number later on. But one thing I would say is, as we're progressing first decision speedily, we always continue to go back and look at the backlog to see which ones will have to have the ability to progress further through that backlog, especially where we have further submissions or we have delays that they are technical of nature.
I mean, you mentioned that there was a large number who had been waiting a long time. What's a long time?
So for some people, it can be years where cases get where people can just continue to bring subsequent further submissions because of the backlog in appeals. It's currently taking, somebody will give the precise number, but I think somewhere over 50 weeks to hear an appeal at the moment.
60.
So and it's up to saying it's near 60 weeks. So if you keep putting further submissions in, you can be stuck in the system for quite a long time, and that is why we need to increase the processing and throughput.
You mentioned earlier the changes that are being introduced in the new board. How long will it take for those changes to impact that group of people who I refer to them as effectively in limbo? How long will it take for you to
So some of the things we're doing
some of those cases
start to make a difference to some of those cases. So as we increase judicial capacity, we'll be able to bring more cases through more quickly. But it will take a long time for us to build all the reforms to the system to deal with that sort of number of people who which has been allowed to build up over the past year.
Thank you, Chair.
And I'm going to bring in Paul in a second, but this is sort of self-feeding, isn't it? Because you get huge delays in cases. It means that they can come back for an appeal on the basis that they've got a settled life in this country. So isn't it in everybody's interest that particularly these very long delayed cases are prioritised?
Yes, so that and that again comes back to the sort of philosophy behind both what we are doing and what the NAO sets out in the report, which was we need to address all of these issues in parallel. We need to increase the speed of our decision making. We need to build up capacity so we can get more throughput. We need to keep increasing the numbers of removals that we can make, but it is a set of operational capacity and policy changes that we are going to need to make to address this. In the meantime, yes, we need to bring the oldest appeals through the system as quickly as we can, get people to bring forward new evidence.
Okay, Paul Kohler, please.
Sorry, you've sidestepped into appeals and reform the appeal process, but can I take you back to Sarah's question? It's paragraph 2.12, it's page 27, not 14, page 27 of the report. We're talking about the 41% in the analysis that were not waiting an appeal, or had gone through the process and simply were in limbo. Now, no matter what you do to the appeal process, if 41% of people who've gone through it and aren't waiting for an appeal are still simply out there, what are you going to do about that? That's what we're asking about, not the appeal process.
So where people are failed asylum seekers, what we are doing is increasing returns. We are increasing our illegal working visits. We are increasing the arrests we are getting from illegal working visits. We have increased returns overall by 23% in the 16 months from July 2024 over the period beforehand, and we are continuing to use both the powers we have to facilitate voluntary returns and more enforced returns, and the number of asylum appeals, the number of asylum cases that have been removed has gone up considerably in the nation.
And can we have the figure of the number who are in this limbo at this stage? Because an increased percentage of returns doesn't mean much if you're not returning many in the first place. We need to see how many are in that group and how big the problem is. On the sample, 41% of the sample were simply in limbo. And what we're asking is how many are in that group. Well, and you must know that. No, not at your fingertips.
Well, Rannia gave the 224,000.
No, that was a different figure. That was a different figure.
Well, we're not talking talking at cross purposes, and we'll make sure we get you the appropriate number.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. I think Clive just wanted to come in, and then I'm going to take a break after Clive.
Back to these people who have finished in the system, they've got no more appeals in, so they're not going to be accepted as an asylum seeker. Right. Do you know where they are?
So
physically,
we know where some of them are. Some of them are in our asylum support. But some of them are not in asylum accommodation. They're elsewhere in the country. We have a number of reporting mechanisms that people stay in touch with the Home Office and with immigration enforcement, but not everybody complies with that. So where people aren't complying with the reporting regime, we seek to trace them.
What happens when you trace them?
Then they come back into the reporting regime, and we seek to.
What happens when they don't report?
Well, where people don't
know where they are.
fall out of contact, then they are they're not complying with their bail conditions. Then they are an absconder, and then what we do is seek to trace them, and we either do that through our routine immigration enforcement work, or through a specific team we've got that
But it's running circles, isn't it? You trace them again, and then they disappear again. And you trace them again. So is a
number of them we bring into detention and we remove. That's what immigration.
If you can't remove them, what happens then? I'm trying to get my head around the system.
Yeah. So there are. I mean, there are lots of different categories of people in this group. So we, through a number of mechanisms, seek to remove people who do not have a right to be in the UK. We do that through reporting mechanisms, immigration enforcement, either agreeing a voluntary removal or bringing somebody into detention and enforcing removal. Where people are not in contact with the Home Office, sometimes we identify them through illegal working visits, and illegal working visits we are doing more year on year and increasing our arrests. Sometimes people are identified by the police, and the police get in touch with immigration enforcement, and we seek to remove them. And then there's obviously a large number of people who we are just maintaining contact with through the contact regime.
So you have people then who are arrested for illegal working. What happens to them?
They're arrested for illegal working. They are brought into detention if they do not have a right to be in the UK, and they are removed.
And if you can't remove them at that point?
If we can't remove them at that point, then we set bail conditions, and they have to stay in. The kind of nature of that contact will depend.
Can I also ask you one other question that we could probably go on this for quite a long time, pointing some of the holes in that. But when we had a hearing about the visas for health and care and other workers who came to the end of their visa, and we asked how you knew whether they'd left the country, the answer was you went to airlines and asked them. Is that the case with failed asylum seekers? Well, you go to airlines and ask them if they've left.
So we collect a lot of data, passenger information, which tells us, which enables us where we do.
That's the only way you know whether someone's left the country, is it? Unless you actually deport them, or they agree to go through a system of yours.
Yeah. So people either go because they choose to go, because they agree voluntary removal, or because we enforce their removal.
You don't actually know who's in the country or not, do you?
So it is possible for an individual to be outside the country without having told the Home Office.
And inside the country without you knowing?
Well, that's the nature of illegal arrivals. If somebody gets in clandestinely into the back of a lorry.
But once they're here, they've gone through your system, you don't then know whether people are here in the country or not, do you?
So as I said, it is possible for somebody to enter the country illegally. That is precisely why we are making all the changes.
I'm not talking about entering, I'm talking about leaving. You don't actually know who's left, do you? So you don't actually know who's here, who's left and who hasn't left.
So we don't at the moment count absolutely everybody out of the country. Right. We do know where the vast majority of people are, because we have got contact regimes, and we stay in. They stay in touch with us. We stay in touch with them, and that is how we are managing.
Let's have a little note about what the vast majority actually means.
Yeah, I mean it means the very vast majority of people in the country.
Let's have a little note about the numbers. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we've had a good session to start with. So what I'm going to do is now take a 5-minute break, just to warn everybody that microphones will be on, so sound travels. The clock is now at almost 4:45. Shall we try and be back here by about 5:10 to conclude the session? Order. Welcome back to the committee's hearing. And we start today now with Blake Stevenson. Please, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. I have some questions, please, in relation to the capacity at the appeal stage. So the government's commitment to clear the backlog has ended up shifting the pressure to the appeal stage. So, Ms Churchill, would you be able to walk us through what actions you're taking to improve judicial availability and capacity, please?
Yes, I'm happy to make a start on that. So a few things we're doing to get cases heard faster through the system. First of all, on judicial capacity, as you say, we've been taking action to recruit into the first-tier tribunal of the Immigration and Asylum Chamber. We've just completed one round of recruitment, which has led to the recruitment of additional 25 salaried judges and 61 fee-paid judges. That takes us from a baseline of around 389, it's a combination of salaried and fee-paid judges at the end of 25, and towards a figure of 460 who will hopefully be sitting at the beginning of this financial year, March 26. We've also launched 2 further round of recruitments for both salaried judges and fee-paid judges. We don't know, of course, how successful those recruitment campaigns will be yet, but we're hoping by March 27 to have a total figure of around 550. In addition to that, as the Permanent Secretary mentioned earlier in the hearing, the Senior President of Tribunals has organised for a number of retired judges. I think 24 retired judges are currently supporting hearings in the Chamber, and has authorised some judges who primarily sit in a different chamber, but who are also authorised to sit in the Immigration and Appeals Chamber, and I think there's around 60 of those. So you can see that that's quite a significant increase in judicial capacity, but also there's the question of making sure that no court time is wasted, no tribunal time is wasted. So in addition to increases of judicial capacity, the Courts and Tribunal Service is taking a range of other steps, including increasing the number of cases heard remotely. So you'll probably know that some cases are heard remotely within each centre, but the Tribunal Service also operates what's called a virtual region, where if a case is obviously being heard remotely, people can be anywhere in the country. That currently has a sitting day profile of around 1,000, but we're working to increase that capacity and should be able to, we think, double the volume of appeals heard each day in that virtual region. And then secondly, the Courts and Tribunal Service is looking at increasing the use of float lists. So you'll be aware, I think, that they hold these lists so that if a case suddenly falls for some reason, that an additional case can be dropped in at short notice, so that judicial time is not wasted. And then finally, obviously, you'll be aware that we've been looking at prioritisation of cases through the system. We've been running some pilots under which some administrative and legal officer resource is being ring-fenced to prioritise the progression of supported appeal cases through the system. And that's a forerunner to, obviously, this spring we'll be implementing the new 24-week statutory time frame legislated for last year, which requires us to resolve cases with individuals in supported accommodation or non-detained FNOs within a new statutory time frame of 24 weeks. So that's just a selection of the things that we're trying to do to get cases through the tribunals faster.
So on the recruitment, it sounds like you've been reasonably successful in hiring more paid judges. In the report, the NAO report, figure 6, we were told that one of the issues was is in relation to poor incentives in comparison to sort of competing tribunals. So have you had to do something differently in order to attract judges to these jobs away from other competing tribunals? And is there an impact in other tribunals as a result of your success?
So I think these 2 rounds of most recent recruitment I've just talked about were specific recruitments to the Immigration and Asylum Chamber. So sometimes the first-tier tribunal will run a kind of generic competition, if you like, for for judges to sit across any chamber, and then once they've been appointed, as it were, the senior president of tribunals will decide which chamber to appoint them to. But because we needed very specifically additional capacity in the Immigration and Asylum chamber, those 2 recruitments I've just referenced were specific recruitments to that chamber for the purpose of getting that resource in the right place. But also, as it happens, I think it's a bit faster to run recruitments when you're specifically recruiting to a specific chamber.
And from the recruitment that you have done, have you modelled what that does to the appeals backlog? So do you know, for example, where that backlog will be in a year, 2 years, etc.?
We haven't done a full job on that modelling. Obviously, what we can see is as the amount of judicial capacity increases, that obviously increases the number of cases that you can get through, and we would obviously expect the number of disposals to increase. And so we can kind of see that. What, of course, we don't know, the other sort of variable factors. One is, of course, the number of receipts coming into the tribunal at the same time. And the second, as we were just reflecting earlier in the hearing, obviously, at the same time, the Home Office is doing the work to establish the new independent appeals body. And as we were just talking about earlier, we've got a lot of detailed planning work to do with the Home Office to work out what the time frame for that new body is, which new cases and what volume of new cases that new appeals body might pick up instead of them going into the tribunal. So because of all those kind of variable factors, I can't give you a really clear, we've drawn the line and we can see that it does this. But what we do know, obviously, is increasing judicial capacity, as I've talked about, obviously increases the number of disposals over time.
Would you be able to walk us through what you think the implications for judges are of the new asylum model?
The new asylum appeals body. So yes, obviously, when the new body is established, we'll need to work, as we've been saying, with the Home Office to establish what types of cases that body will start to hear and when. And obviously, those cases will then go to that body and not into the first-tier tribunal as we currently have them. So over time, obviously, the caseload of that chamber is going to decrease. We haven't quite modelled that through, but given the size of the backlog that we currently have, the size of the caseload we already have in the first-tier tribunal, we expect it will be several years for that caseload still to be in existence, and the judiciary, who are part of that chamber, will continue to hear them.
And can I just add that we have actually been really pleased that the application numbers have been healthy. So we have announced a different system, but we know that there'll be some dual running for a number of years, and we've been really pleased with the amount of interest in immigration and asylum appeals and work in that area. So really encouraging, actually.
Yeah. And are you doing, my final question, Chair, sorry, are you doing anything specific to avoid delays in the appeal system, for example, to ensure people have the right advice, access to legal aid, so that there are not undue delays through the system?
Yes, we're working really hard on legal aid. We're monitoring the number of providers. We've increased the fees for immigration judges. We've already rolled out the measures that we need to uplift those fees. We're also looking at things like accreditation funding, which providers would normally pay for. We're looking at paying for that. So we're hoping that the changes we're making to legal aid will also help to speed cases through the system.
Thanks very much. Matt, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come in very briefly on that recruitment issue. I mean, congratulations, obviously, on recruiting these additional people. Could you tell us where they're coming from? Are they coming from other parts of the judiciary, or are they new recruits or coming from somewhere else?
So the judges that I was just talking about are judges being recruited to sit primarily in the Immigration and Asylum chamber. Those will probably not be people who have been already authorised from another chamber, because I was just mentioning the senior president of tribunals was already, for example, those who are ticketed in other chambers to sit in the immigration and asylum chamber. That is already happening. So I think those won't be people who've recruited from one chamber into another, if that makes sense. So they will be new into the tribunal system, and they will be legal practitioners.
Okay, thank you.
So, the NAO report makes clear that there are these multiple appeals, and that you don't currently necessarily know how many times any one individual has appealed. Will the new system eliminate that? And I can't quite see, if you've got multiple appeals and you don't know how many times they've appealed, how you can make sure that the next appeal is heard efficiently, because you won't know what happened in the previous appeal.
So you're right that we don't know in the current system if someone's appealed. That's part of the problem with our systems not properly integrating with the Home Office systems. We might come a bit later to the work that we're doing to ensure interoperability between the systems, because in preparation for the new 24-week statutory time frame, we've been having to do that job of better integration between our systems so that we can actually identify the cases that are in supported accommodation and the cases that are non-detained FNOs, because as the committee probably knows, that's not something we can do automatically at the moment. That has to be done through manual processes. So there is work going on to better sort of link the systems up digitally. I'm afraid I don't know whether that will help us on the question of repeated appeals within the current first tier tribunal. But the systems that the Home Office will need to establish for the new independent appeals body will be separate systems. But again, we will have to make sure that the interoperability is there. And I don't know whether Simon or Rannia want to say anything about the work that they've been doing to reflect on that for the new body.
Yes. As you probably know, the system that we have for asylum data is called Atlas, is the end-to-end system, and it's unique in that it offers a pen picture per individual and its history as it passed through the asylum system. So that picture will know if the individual has passed through, appealed, etc. So as we're joining our systems through this new API, we should be able to give shared information with the HMCTS that says that this particular individual is in supported accommodation and that's his history as is going through, not necessarily for the judges to see how many appeals they've done, but we will know internally how many they will have had.
Can I just ask you, on that Atlas system, you've had problems with it, migrating data from the old system onto the new data. Can you give us an update on that and when that is all likely to be functioning properly?
Yes. So everything has migrated into Atlas. So Atlas is the only operational system right now in decision making. We are working to improve some of the join up with some of the operations, sort of the end-to-end, both in terms of who enters the asylum system and how they exit. We're also making great strides in developing linkages, future linkages on the system with LA and with the local authorities and police. So it is not perfect in terms of the things it can do, but it is a system orchestrator that gives you a pen picture of the individual, and right now everything has migrated onto it.
Tell us what it should do. When will it do?
So it does it. It does it now.
It does it now.
Have you migrated all the information onto it?
Yes. So the previous case information database, it was called SID, it has now that's the legacy system that we have closed down. Of course, there is an ongoing program of continuous improvement for Atlas. I mean, it's worth saying Atlas isn't just an asylum casework system. It is covering all of our immigration casework, and that's one of the strengths of it, so that we can integrate our system. But there is ongoing continuous improvement needed for any sort of system of that sort.
Great. Clive, please.
Yes. We'll come back to this issue of information in the system, which appears to be one of the fundamental problems, that it just isn't there in many cases. So one suggestion that's been made is about having a unique identifier for asylum seekers. So wherever they are in the system and passes through from different departments, different agencies, that individual can be identified. When are we going to get that in place?
So the current system does give, the moment an individual asylum seeker goes through the system or starts, gets its own number. So that number exists. The problem is not that it doesn't have the number to pass through the system, it's the fact that the systems are not connected. So it is not connected currently to HMCTS, as I said, it's not connected currently to police, etc. But the number that an asylum seeker is given when it starts his case exists.
So we're working towards integrating with the Home Office by spring, so that we can use that to introduce the 24-week statutory time frame. And that work is going well so far. So the join up between the Home Office and the HMCTS system, we're hoping will be in place by spring.
Right, this year?
This year.
Yeah. Right, and why can't it be the same identification number for the police, for local authorities, for every other part of government?
I didn't say it can't be, I said it is not done right now. It is not ready.
When will it be done then? Is that the intention?
This is the intention. The intention is to create a new blueprint for how we create the data system inside the Home Office to ensure that we have not only connectivity, but also everything is from manual to Atlas.
That's all right for the Home Office. We're talking about outside now, in other parts of government. If the Department of Justice can get the same system in as the Home Office has for an identification number for an asylum seeker, why can't that be rolled out to the rest of government in a reasonable time frame?
So to your point, we completely agree. We need to have consistent data that we can share with other organisations. That does take a lot of time, investment, and those sorts of things. We are doing that with MOJ at the moment. We are increasing the data sharing we do with other local partners, but at the moment all of that is not automatic. We don't have a timescale currently for rolling that out to other partners, but we are absolutely committed to continuing to improve and increase the data sharing we do.
Talking about the whole of data, I mean, there's a lot to do, and we'll come on to one or two of those examples, but just an identification number, that's not difficult, is it? To have that same identification number for the same person when they move through different parts of government, it's not difficult, is it?
No, we've got that. As Rannia said, we've got that identification number. What we need to do
but it's not used elsewhere in the system, is it? The Department of Justice are just going to adopt your identification number, but nobody else is. Why?
I mean, it has been actually quite complex to integrate the two systems, so it's not entirely simple because we were operating different systems, so you have to help those systems to talk to each other and share data in order to be able to use one identifier across the system. So I mean, you say it's not that difficult. It is actually quite difficult. It needs money and a focused amount of effort. But we're confident we will get there by spring. It's not an overnight fix, and I'm sure that the Home Office are working with other partners.
Well, I'm sure they are, but could they tell us when for the other the bits of government that need joining in as well then?
I do not have a timeline for this right now.
Well, I think that's something we might ask you to develop for us. There's an awful lot of data that just isn't available, aren't there? Information you haven't got. And you said, Rannia, you're coming new to this. Mm-hmm. Presumably this is one of your objectives now, to try and start making the system more effective and efficient by having this data. I mean, with the NAO report, I mean, it's just quite staggering, isn't it? The Home Office couldn't give data on the number of people in the asylum system who were not receiving any form of state support. The Home Office could not provide data on the outcomes of further submissions. The Home Office did not have complete data on the number of people who had absconded from the asylum system, or the total number of people currently subject to some form of enforcement action, or all unsuccessful removals and their causes. There's a lot of stuff you don't know, isn't there?
I mean, so we as we've said a number of times, we have got a lot of data on individuals, the challenges joining that data up between different systems and managing it through time, because people move between different bits of ours and other systems. They move in and out of contact. So we absolutely agree there is a lot to do to continue to improve and strengthen the data that we have got. We have built a single system to enable us to start to do that, and there's a lot more work to do.
And if I may add,
Yes.
we do have operational data. So the problem that sometimes we face is the ability to give the assurance for the data to be released. But operational data, people know what they're dealing with as they're exploring asylum cases. And I think it's this next stage, which is the assurance for release.
So, Bart, if you come back to us in a year's time, all these questions you can't answer now, you'll be able to answer.
I would expect we would have made a considerable amount of progress. They're things we hadn't done a year ago that we have done now. I don't think we say.
But if you have got,
we would have sorted out every data issue in.
No, but you're telling us you've really got the data. You just can't release it because you can't be certain about its accuracy. So hopefully in a year's time you will be able to be certain about its accuracy. Isn't that the intention?
So the intention is to continue to improve all of our data exactly as you say. Whether we will have done all of that for everything we've got in a year, I think is unlikely, given just the huge amount of information that's there. But there is a lot that we have done in the last year, as we have rolled out a number of programmes across the asylum and immigration.
So, in a year's time, is there any chance you'll be able to tell us what's happened to people whose claims have been refused but haven't been removed?
Yes, so I think we will have improved. We will have improved our data systems, the reports we can run, and the sort of security of our data quality. We have done that in a number of areas. It kind of precisely what we will have in place in a year, I can't tell you now, but we have a large programme of work to continue to improve our data.
On the board you set up and all the other things you're putting in place, surely one of the objectives has to be to set targets for when you are going to get all this data, so you can actually run the system properly.
And it is. One of the things that I put in place is a group of also data analysts across government that will be able to enable us to join up data. So it is a subgroup on the board that will help and has already started working with MOJ on that. And that is the ambition that as the board progresses, the analytical work underneath it that underpins it also progresses.
Now you're getting full buy-in from all the other parts of government to enable that to happen.
Yes, and there is a lot of capability as well across government enabled to do that.
Thank you, Clive. Just before I bring in Paul and then Matt, on a very simple point of information, Simon, in relation to my previous question, almost, I hope, with a yes-no answer. The NAA report, page 31, paragraph 2.2, it says at the second bullet point, staff are continuing to refer back to the closed case information database, CID system, that you said that Atlas has replaced. Yeah. And there was evidence of a case identifying numbers from that system still being used. Can we be assured that that is not now the case?
So, yes.
That's what we need.
The database is closed. Some people do still operate off spreadsheets. This is one of the data issues we have, so we end up with multiple records, if you like, and that is one of the important data quality, data cleansing exercises we need to do. But yes, the database is closed.
Right. Paul.
So this is probably a really naive question. We already have unique identifiers which we use across government, NHS numbers, NI numbers. Why not give them one of those?
Well, so because some people don't have a right to work and all sorts of issues. So what we give everybody an identifier as they come in. When someone is granted asylum, they get status through an e-visa. So we do have ways of identifying people. But as people come into the asylum system, they are likely to go in multiple different directions, have different rights. And so we use an asylum number, and that's what we build our system.
I thought you might say that about NI, which is why I said NHS number as well. Surely they will all at some point be able to use some aspects of the NHS. Well, why can't they just be given that number? And we use that number across different parts of government at the moment to identify people, don't we? Why not just do that?
Well, as I say, people come in for very different lengths of time, different rights. We just give them an asylum identifier so that we can do the system. Some people we are aiming to turn around and remove as quickly as possible.
And I think ideally, at some point, we will want to join up all of these numbers, but that would be a longer and more complex process. At the moment, it's simpler to use the Home Office immigration identifier, and that will make sure that we can track them through the system.
The electronic identifier.
Slightly, but probably different. But government's thinking about all of these things, isn't it? But at the moment, we have no plans. But eventually, it would be great if all of our systems could talk to each other, so that we wouldn't particularly need to worry about the actual number. We could just join up all of this data, but that's a little way off yet.
Thank you. Matt, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask about improving data quality and collaboration as well, please. So if I could ask to Rannia and Josh initially, what steps are you taking to ensure timely, accurate sharing of data with local authorities, including information about safeguarding, details of people who are moving in and out of asylum accommodation? Please.
Maybe I can start and then Josh can follow. So we have multiple agency fora where we come together and discuss with local authorities the data that we have. We have been working on the premise, as I said earlier, that we will be able to join Atlas at some point with the local authorities in the future. We have made progress in creating tools. One in particular is called Place-Based Visibility Tool that gives councils regular, accurate updates of the type of population they have in their area. Not specific individual by individual, but the kind of breakdown that they have. We've also been updating our safeguarding tools in regard to the contracts that we had, so the safeguarding framework. So internally we understand the responsibilities of the suppliers as opposed to the Home Office in terms of safeguarding, and we do share, of course, data with regard to children as they pass through local authority, as they hand it over to local authority through the National Transfer Scheme. Josh, you may want to add a bit more.
I think the one thing to add would be that in December we published the National Cross-Government Plan for Homelessness, in which there was a commitment from the Home Office that for any newly granted refugee at risk of homelessness, within 2 days of that individual getting a notification that their asylum support will be discontinued, the asylum provider will notify the local authority. And that's something that I think is really welcomed by the local authority sector, who've been worried about people coming out of asylum support without enough notice and falling into homelessness.
Great, thank you. And you said that was starting when, sorry?
Rannia, I will turn to you on the implementation date for that, I think. But the commitment was in December that it will happen.
We haven't agreed an implementation date yet.
Okay.
You want to come in on local authority?
Great. And do you have any understanding of cost associated with implementing that?
Not right now.
So we already have a lot in place, which is how we will do this. We obviously write to individuals when their asylum claim is determined. That is shared with suppliers. We have put in place 50 officers who are working regionally in our accommodation to support people if they are granted asylum, to facilitate their move out and try and minimise the number that go into homelessness and maximise the number that find a sustainable route out. So those are the delivery mechanisms we will use, and we are already funding and putting that in place.
And I should add that the, as we call them, asylum move-on liaison officers are 15 number. They have achieved over the last couple of years supporting 18,000 asylum seekers to move through the system after they were granted asylum.
So did you say 18,000?
18.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. And the multi-agency forum that you have with local authorities, what's the local authorities' view of this? Are there things that the local authorities are asking for that still need to be done, or that you're considering at the moment, or?
You may want to say a bit more, Simon, on that. This is we have something we call the Asylum and Resettlement Council Senior Engagement Group, which is working jointly with MHCLG. This is senior officials and CEOs. I have not personally attended one yet. One of the things we are discussing with them is the case of public protection, and we're putting some work in place jointly with the Home Office is putting some work in place jointly with the local authorities to ensure that police forces have information, as well as local authorities, or the kind of individuals that exist in their authority. This is something that we have started working with. I think the local authorities and police forces are very keen to progress, and this is something we're taking forward in the next couple of months.
Do you have a sense that, I mean, that does sound very interesting. Do you have a sense of how long it will take to complete that process?
So I think it's work we've started. We have increased over the last 2 years the amount of information we can share. I think it's probably fair to say local authorities want us to share more rapid information, particularly about individuals as they move between different parts of our accommodation. I think it will. We're starting to. I think it's going to be an ongoing thing that we build up over time. There are some issues about data sharing that we need to manage our way through.
There always are. Thank you. And then finally, from me, why do you think that the sharing of data with local authorities has historically been so inaccurate or unsuccessful?
So, look, I think it's. If I sort of go back to when I started in this role, I think there was a really difficult, bad relationship in some ways between some of what the Home Office was doing and local authorities. We weren't sharing enough data. We have sought over the last 2 or 3 years to build more kind of governance between us to share more information, working very, very closely with MHCLG, and to start to kind of establish a better relationship and way of doing this. We now have monthly meetings at a regional level with councils, Home Office and our providers about the accommodation in an area, which has moved a long way. We're now seeking to sort of develop that around information about people, so that we can better manage some of these safeguarding issues we're talking about. That's a sort of different challenge in terms of data sharing, but I think we now have the relationships and trust to do that.
And just to bolster that, I have sat on the liaison group, the Asylum and Resettlement Council Senior Engagement Group, and I don't want to speak for the Local Government Association and the local government sector. They can speak for themselves, but I think they will tell you that both the spirit and the content over the last 2 to 3 years has seen a significant improvement in terms of the relationship with the Home Office. They'll always say that there's more to do, but they will report it's got better.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief.
So can I just ask you, Simon, on this? I mean, one of the problems with dispersal sites has been that the Home Office hasn't consulted at an early enough stage with the relevant local authority, and that has been an ongoing problem. Can we be assured that that is now being addressed?
Yeah, so I think at a systemic level, absolutely. So, as I say, we have monthly meetings. We share the data about the accommodation at a local authority level. We have got various tools and assessments so that where we assess the amount of dispersal we're seeking in a local authority area. That's based on a range of different criteria about the accommodation they've got already, social factors, access to public services, etc. And through that, we have managed to increase dispersal. There are still cases where we procure accommodation a local authority would rather not. There are still cases where we don't get the sort of precise individual consultation perhaps quite right, but there were equally, and I was talking to a chief executive earlier today about something completely different, who was really pleased with the fact we had agreed not to procure some accommodation in their area because of its very specific location.
The question was about dispersal sites. So you identify a large military base and you decide that that's going to be a dispersal site, but you don't go and discuss it with the local authority at an early enough stage, because North Eye is a typical example of this we heard in our hearing. It had the local authority been consulted at an earlier stage, it might have made life a lot easier for you.
Apologies, Chair. I was talking about dispersal accommodation, as we call it, which is the sort of housing around the places. Where we're doing specific work on large sites, and Rannia can say more. We do engage with the public service providers as well as the local authorities as we're moving towards a site. Definitely not as early, I would suspect, as they would always like, but we have learned a lot from the cases, some of the unsuccessful cases we talked about earlier, but also some of the more successful cases such as Wethersfield. But those, those tend to remain quite challenging conversations.
Thank you. Lloyd Hatton, please.
Thank you, Chair. And to build on the points just made by the Chair, in 2023, this committee recommended that the Home Office move to a much more meaningful engagement with local councils, so they would have a say on the use of accommodation in their areas. My understanding is that doing that and the implementation of the recommendations of this committee has been delayed significantly, and it has not yet happened. Why is it that actually I believe the current date for implementation isn't until September this year?
So Rannia can say more perhaps. So we have implemented a lot, as I've just described, of how we engage with local authorities around accommodation. We are where we are working on individual large sites. We do when we're moving towards using them. I engage with public service providers in the area as well as the local authority. We are doing that around Crowborough at the moment. That doesn't prevent some protest around us wanting to use, but we are doing our engagement in a different way.
You do accept, Simon, there has been a delay in the implementation of the recommendations put forward by this committee, and
so I will have to look at the sort of precise the precise recommendation you're talking about. But what I can tell you is that we are increasing the amount of engagement we do around accommodation on a day-by-day basis.
Can I come in? So I don't know if you're referring to what we call as asylum accommodation plans, which is the plans that we jointly do with the local authority. That we do not publish them on the common understanding between us and local authority that they will not be published, but it is those plans that give us the ability to understand how much potentially we can expand within a local authority or not. So that's the work we have been doing. I'll come back on big sites as well.
Thank you. And if you, I suppose, where we have come from here is there was this idea of limited engagement tactics before. And again, without trying to sound like a broken record, I return to the example of the Bibby Stockholm barge in my constituency, where those tactics were in play. And we saw an almost immediate breakdown of relations between the Home Office, Dorset Council, the local town councils and the local MP at the time. So what reassurance can you give this committee that you have learnt from the mistakes made, where you essentially on day one had all of local government completely at war with the Home Office?
Yeah, so that we are engaging in a much deeper way, month by month, with local authorities around asylum accommodation. We are sharing more data, and we are working closely where we are seeking to implement a large site specifically.
And just finally on that point, could you just make clear to this committee what measures the Home Office is taking to engage with a much broader range of stakeholders so that some of the sort of failures of the past around safeguarding, around health, around fire risks are not repeated? Again, mistakes we did see in the case of the Bibby Stockholm barge.
Yeah, so we have instituted a new way of looking at the large sites going live, which is a gate process. And that means a couple of things. First of all, before we take a decision on a site, we will do a lot more detailed examination of the site, due diligence, engineering works, understanding what it is that the site may have in case of sites that are previously used by the MOD. It could be old ordnance, etc., etc. At the same time, we're also trying to understand multiple routes to planning, so we know very early on what is the ability to utilize the site and how that stacks up. And armed with that information, we progress to the stage of checking on accounting officer assurance, as well, of course, as ministerial decisions, and then we make the decision to go live. So it's a lot more orchestrated, a lot more staged than we'd have done in the past, as I understand it.
So with that in mind, can you reassure this committee that large accommodation sites will not be procured before that engagement with stakeholders takes place, so we don't find an instance such as was the case with HMP Northeye, where the building was riddled of asbestos, or as was the case with the Stockholm barge, where the infrastructure of that had Legionella?
The current process will definitely make sure that this does not happen.
You don't think those mistakes will be repeated?
No.
Okay. Finally, if I may, Chair, could you outline a bit more detail, please, and this might be one for Josh as well as Simon, about how we're going to sort of increase the supply of dispersal accommodation to include local councils, so actually they can start to make the right kinds of decisions about their spending, so they're not just looking for quick fixes, but they're actually making the right long-term investment into temporary accommodation.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll say something very quickly, because I think it's probably repetitious of things we've already said largely, and then Josh might want to say more. So the work we are doing is, we have established regular discussions, both with which include both suppliers, strategic migration partnerships, and local authorities to look at what our plans are for expanding where we are expanding dispersed accommodation based on a number of factors that enables local authorities to engage with the sort of plans and the need, but we are then also looking at different ways of delivering accommodation, building on lessons we've learned from some of the work we've done through Afghan resettlement and other migration, which are programmes run by MHCLG.
So, building on the lessons of the Local Authority Housing Fund, which has been very popular with local authorities as a way of delivering accommodation, both for domestic temporary accommodation and for Afghan resettlement. There is some money set aside from HCLG to do a similar kind of fund for asylum accommodation. So the way that would work would be capital funding to local authorities, who can then go and buy housing, which in the short term can be leased to the Home Office or Home Office contractors as asylum accommodation, but then in the longer term can revert to local authority ownership and act as social housing or temporary accommodation. So it's bolstering the existing dispersal accommodation model, but taking a different approach in a way that leaves a kind of lasting asset with the local authority.
And on that point of engagement with local councils, how has there been a significant improvement in ways of working from where we were perhaps 2 or 3 years ago?
Well, on the particular programme I was talking about, we haven't yet done it. We announced that we were going to put funding towards it back in July, and we've had really good conversations with lots of local authorities about how to design it. But if your question is, I think, more broadly about how local authorities are feeling about asylum accommodation in general, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think, as we discussed earlier, I hope the local authority sector would say, and I think they would, that in general and on average, things are in a better place than they were 2 to 3 years ago. But as Rannia and Simon have said, there remain some frustrations around whether they always welcome the asylum accommodation being put into the place where it arrives. I don't know, Rannia and Simon, if you want to add to that.
I think that's fair. I think we've got a sort of systemic approach to it. Sometimes works well. Sometimes on individual cases it works less well. So we do still sometimes surprise local authorities with things they'd rather not have heard at the last minute. Sometimes we can alter our course. Sometimes that's more. So this is about kind of continuous, ongoing engagement, data sharing, and that's what we're seeking to do.
Thank you. Lloyd?
Thank you, Chair. Yep.
Very brief, Simon. Could you please just give us an update on Crowborough and your negotiations with the local?
Yeah, so we are working with service providers and the local authority locally with the aim of using Crowborough as a large site for asylum accommodation.
Okay, thank you. Chris Kane, you've been very patient.
Thank you. Simon, can I ask you a quick question? You mentioned just 2 minutes ago that when you're engaging with local authorities, you said definitely not as early as they would like. Now, I suspect there's a bit of tension when you do it. In terms of that, definitely not as early as you would like, is there work still to be done, do you think, on how early you do engage in finding that common ground for what is acceptable to both the Home Office and to local authorities?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I think we are. I think we are moving in the right direction. Sometimes the things the Home Office want to do are not things the local authority are going to want us to do. And as I say, I think we've got a better approach to it. I think we've got a better set of relationships. But there is more we will need to keep doing to work with partners.
Because sometimes they can get surprised. They can get very, very late notice. It's not quite as early as they would like. It's sometimes incredibly late in the process where they get knowledge of that.
Sometimes we can. Sometimes local authorities late. We will seek to improve how we kind of engage as we do it. We need to balance that with sort of delivery requirements we've got.
Okay, I suppose as a former local council leader, not having the direct experience of this, but having spoken to council leaders I have, sometimes it's not just that it's not early, it's that it's ridiculously late before they actually hear what's happening. So do you think that there is an understanding in the Home Office that getting, even if it's difficult, even if they don't want it, even if the fact that the local authorities don't necessarily want to engage in the way you would like them to, is not a reason to keep them in the dark till very late in the process?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think we are doing that better than we were a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And if I may add, one of the things we are doing in this sort of gated process that I mentioned before is looking on social cohesion. We can't do this alone without the local authorities, so this is part of that process.
Okay. Josh, can I ask you a couple of questions? Paragraph 1.13 in the report, actual spending by local authorities in supporting people seeking asylum is poorly understood. Again, with my former hat on as a council leader, I think that's a very good and accurate statement. What are you doing to improve the visibility of actual costs for local authorities?
The amount that we know is driven by the degree of the reporting burden that we put on local authorities. So at the moment, we ask local authorities to report on the asylum seeker costs on 2 particular reporting lines. One is about children's social care costs, where we break out how much children's social care costs are due to asylum. And the other is where we ask local authorities to report on where they provide some services directly to adult asylum seekers. So we know those amounts. We know that in the children's social care system, it's for the last financial year, £564 million, and for support for adult asylum seekers, £121 million nationally. But we do know that beyond that, there are other areas of spend that local authorities report on where they don't break out how much of it is going to asylum seekers. So, for example, education services or homelessness services. At the moment, there aren't plans to demand more reporting burdens on local authorities. It is something that ministers could consider.
Why is it that the burden always has to rest with the local authorities? Why can the burden not rest with you to get that information? You know, in terms of what's happening with education, language support, integration services, social care, the report does go into this, but even the way that the language that you've used about that being a reporting burden, but the burden rests with the local authorities. How can we change it so that the burden does not rest with the local authorities when they're already stretched to almost breaking point with what they can afford to do?
I think ideas are welcome. I mean, how is central government to know how much an individual local authority, for example, take a local authority's...
give them more money to employ people to do the reporting burden. The reporting burden is left to be delivered by an increasingly dwindling number of people who can deliver it. So you could fund the reporting burden itself with additional people. Could you not do that?
In theory, that is something you could do, and then it would be a question for ministers to consider about whether that is whether the best use of the funding we give to local authorities and the funding they raise themselves from taxpayers is on more reporting as opposed to frontline services. It's a choice.
But is it not incumbent upon you to understand that burden without giving the local authorities the additional burden of reporting? Can the burden, you say the burden of reporting, why do we not say the burden of gathering information?
We could call it gathering.
Well, then it would put the burden back on you and not the local authorities. I'm just trying to investigate why we're not looking at that.
I'm not sure how central government can know how much a local authority is spending on, for example, education services for asylum seekers without asking the local authority. So unless there's some way of not getting the local authority to do it, we are putting a reporting or gathering burden.
It is my experience of working in local government that national government is very good at placing burdens and responsibilities in local government, but not following up with the resources to deliver on the burden that they're giving them. So the disconnect between what you're asking them to do and what you're giving them the funding to achieve is almost getting to the heart of this question in a broader sense. I'm looking at the reporting requirement just now, but you're giving them additional things to do. Local government is the coal face of service delivery in a lot of this instances. What are you doing to make sure that you're giving them the burden and the resources to meet the burden?
Overall, on how central government is giving local government enough resources to do what it needs to do overall, as this committee will know, in the spending review, there was a settlement that gave £5 billion of new grant funding over the next 3 years to the local government sector. That means that core spending power will go up over the course of the spending review. You know all these figures, and I could keep, but is the question specific?
No, the question is you're giving them you're in effect giving them something to do, which is to deal with the asylum system, but you don't understand how much it's costing them to deliver all of the associated services. You think you've got an idea, and you've got a broad idea, but as the report is saying, when you start interrogating that, you realise that you don't have that full system. So the money that you're offering is not covering the costs to local government. So we're trying to interrogate how are we going to make sure that you're going to get the funding that local government requires to do the job properly and adequately.
Yeah, so overall funding to local government is set to increase in line with the spending review settlement. And not only will the overall amount of money going to local government increase, but also the distribution of it is going to change. Ministers are really clear that the local government funding system of recent years has been broken because, as you say, funding and need have come apart. That's why they're putting in more funding. But also the way that we distribute funding between local authorities is going to be revolutionised and swung much more towards looking at population projections, thus reflecting the impacts of migration and also deprivation. I think
we've got to be careful here. Yeah. We're getting really way beyond this hearing. Can we bring this sort of more towards immigration, please, Chris?
Well, my question, so thank you for that, my question is specifically about immigration and
we've had two or three.
The answers are coming back to that, but I'll move on. So we've got the costs of dealing with people when they're going through the system, but when they've left the system, when they've had a response, how are you ensuring local authorities have adequate information and resources to manage the impact of people granted asylum on homelessness in their areas? That's another question for Josh.
Yeah, so as we mentioned earlier, there was this really important commitment in the December National Housing Strategy, the National Plan for Homelessness, which is this commitment that anybody who is granted refugee status and asked to leave asylum accommodation, the asylum provider will tell the local authority within 2 days that person is going to arrive into the local authority homelessness system. And that's something that local authorities have been calling for a long time because they worry about people coming out of asylum accommodation and falling into homelessness. There are also the measures that we talked about before with asylum move-on liaison officers being placed into the 50 LAs that are most affected. And on top of that, we saw from the spending review in the last year £3.5 billion of investment over the next 3 years in homelessness in local authorities.
Okay, can I ask you a question? As a Scottish MP, I'm always interested in how we talk about taking ownership of this when there's devolved nations involved. Now, perhaps it's more of a question for Simon than it is for Josh, but how are you ensuring that joined-up approach, that joint ownership of the problem that you've got, that we heard Joe talk about with justice, how are you ensuring that's a UK-wide approach and not just an England approach where you're dealing in a devolved situation?
Yeah, and Rannia may want to say something about broader engagement with the devolved administrations, but we do a number of things in the same way I've talked about engagement with local authorities in terms of how we are discussing asylum and accommodation in Scotland and Wales. To the funding point, the Home Office gives various grants and we do that in Scotland and Wales as well as in England in terms of a fixed grant for every...
It's the ownership part. I'm trying to make sure that you're trying to sort out a problem. I'm trying to make sure that you're trying to sort out a problem on a UK-wide level, and you have those robust interactions and connections within the devolved nations as you are setting up within England. So it's about giving me a sense that you are looking at this as a UK-wide problem in the way that you're tackling it and in the way that you're putting in place measures to tackle it. And it's not that there's going to be an imbalance between what's happening in the devolved nations between what's happening in England.
So I don't think there is. So Rannia mentioned some of the sort of senior groups we have on asylum with local authorities. Those include local authority chief executives and representatives in Scotland and Wales. All the work we did on unaccompanied asylum-seeking children jointly with DfE, we also did with local government and with representatives of Scotland and Wales. So where we're doing things on asylum and immigration at a UK level, because it's not devolved, we engage the devolved administrations.
And in terms of that migration of people who have come through the system and presenting as homelessness, as you know, that they can go to Scotland in a different way than they can in England. So Glasgow has been pretty vocal over the last few months that they are facing a disproportionate share of people who are presenting as homeless after they've been through the system. So how are you ensuring that the systems that you're putting in place are mindful of the fact that certainly in Scotland there is a different approach to how we deal with homelessness and in terms of these protections that are baked into the system in England are not the same as in Scotland? So I don't know if that's Simon, but maybe Josh has an opinion.
I think probably Josh is, this is devolved stuff, and as you say, the homelessness rules are different in Scotland in terms of access to temporary accommodation than they are in England. What we, and that is precisely to your point, why we need to make sure we're engaging the devolved administrations, the chief executives of particularly Glasgow, but not only Glasgow, in Scotland, to understand these issues and then seek to manage them as best we can. We can't.
Do you think you are?
Well, there are issues that we can't immediately solve in the homelessness rules are different, so the pressures will fall in different ways, and the costs of those might be different. But what we can do is therefore make sure we understand where the accommodation is, how we can use the support we can put in place, such as those Home Office officers supporting Move On, to recognise the differences in devolved administrations and manage it as best we can.
There is a disproportionate number of people who are arriving in Glasgow to present their homelessness claims than there are in other local authorities in the UK. That's as I understand it. If that's the case, are you looking at Glasgow, you're looking at the Scottish cities to ensure that you're giving them an additional resource to offset the difference of legislation, which is perfectly permissible and perfectly allowable within a devolved situation that we have in this United Kingdom?
So we need to manage the asylum system and the Move On in a way that is consistent and value for money across the UK. Rules are different and impacts are different in different parts of the UK through the choices of those. Through the choices of those nations, and we need to work with them individually, but we're not at the moment giving additional grants in Scotland.
No, I'm not necessarily saying if you get additional grants. But I'm looking at the assurance, I'm not quite getting it, but you're pushing this. So the chair wants me to move on, so let me try one last time. Do you think that the Home Office, and indeed all of this joined up approach that you're trying to look at, is not an English approach to it, it is a UK approach to it, and that you have the data and you have the structures to ensure that the nuances of devolved legislation, which is how we have chosen to set up our United Kingdom, are feeding into the system, and you're making the necessary allowances to deal with that?
Yeah, so I think we've got I think we're putting in place the engagement in the same way. We are understanding the issues where they are different and discussing those impacts where they are different, and that will give us the opportunity collectively to address specific issues where they arise, I would hope. I'm sure there is more we can do, as there is in the sort of wider range of engagement work we're doing.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chris. Chris, please.
Yes, so my series of questions will be on the cost savings promised in the spending review, and then I'll dig detail beneath that. So in the spending review, it's announced £1 billion savings per year up to 2028-29. On table 5.8 in the comprehensive spending review, in a footnote, it says asylum support cost forecast contains some inherent uncertainty. The IFS has said, based on that there's chronic under-budgeting for asylum main estimates. Do you agree with the IFS? And what inherent uncertainty have you presented to the Treasury? And what consequences might that have for future budgeting on that £1 billion?
Thank you. And if I may just separate a couple of issues. So firstly, the spending review talked about a saving of £1 billion by 28-29. So that's the annual saving at that time. It increases between now and then. That is our goal. And the spending review also provided money to support asylum reform and some of the things we've been talking about today as some of the ways in which we will need to make those savings. You are right that there has been the last few years, asylum funding has tended to come through reserve claims at supplementary estimates, which is not the optimal way to manage departmental budgets. That's for a set of historical reasons in the main. Last year, we moved the funding all into the Home Office's main estimate, and that then puts the Home Office in the position to manage those budgets. And as I said, in 24-25, we saved £700 million and hit our budget of £4 billion spending, and we are making further savings this year. So we've sort of got the financial management part of this under much more control in the last 18 months than it was previously. I mean, in terms of the inherent uncertainties, I mean, there are many, and that's not unique to asylum, but there are some sorts of specifics. I mean, we don't control the number of people who come into the system, yet we have a series of statutory duties and responsibilities. We don't control all of the time in which people will spend in the system, because some may leave early, some may appeal, some do various things, and all of that is why this sort of systemic approach that the NAO set out and we've been discussing today is important. But we now have a fixed budget for asylum, and we are seeking to manage within that.
Okay, so you've mentioned a whole systems approach today. I think quite a lot of answers I'm getting are very Home Office specific. So just probing on that whole systems approach that you mentioned, these savings, can you tell me, are they based on a whole systems approach, or are they savings that have been identified from perhaps just the Department for Justice and the Home Office?
So the savings I'm talking about are savings on the Home Office budget. I mean, obviously, as the NAO report says, the vast majority of direct asylum costs and spend is in the Home Office. In terms of accommodation, support for unaccompanied asylum seekers, and so on. Some of that money, as we've just been touching on, we actually pass through to local authorities, both in terms of sort of supporting councils with more people in accommodation and supporting councils that take unaccompanied children into care. So I'm talking mostly about those savings. You're absolutely right about two things. The first is where we make savings that could push costs into other areas, whether that is into the appeal system or into homelessness or some of these issues, and that is why it's really, really important that we are continuing to work together.
So in the report it says 1.12 there's no cross-government budget, and in 2.5 no one accepts responsibility for governance. Would you accept that because you're the one that's making the savings, actually it is a Home Office responsibility to coordinate this whole systems approach?
So it's absolutely true that different departments have separate budgets for these various things. I'm the accounting officer for the Migration and Borders system in the Home Office, and therefore those Home Office costs are my responsibility to meet the accounting officer tests and to report on those. And as part of that, it's really, really important that I am engaging with MOJ, MHCLG and others where we could, if we where it would be possible for us to impose costs on others as we made our own savings, and to make sure we do that in a way that is best for the taxpayer.
Okay, so I've just got three further small points. So one of the areas which will see success is clearing the asylum backlog. Figure 6 in the report indicates you've got a 35% attrition rate in staff. Can I ask, can you provide us with detail on the total headcount that you've had over the last 5 years within the department, and also the attrition rate? Because my concern is that your attrition rate has actually gone up and that you're losing staff.
So I don't have the last 5 years of staff numbers with us. We built the asylum decision maker team up to 2,500 as we went through 2023 to clear the backlog and much of 2024. That number has come down a bit, but that number has come down a bit partly because we've got on top of the backlog and partly because we are quite rightly increasing our productivity. There is, and I don't know if Rannia has the latest, we do see relatively high attrition in these teams. It is a difficult job, but we have built up expertise post the recruitment in 2023 in our management and in our teams to enable a much more sustainable performance, which is what we have seen.
Okay. Moving on to transformation programmes in 2.3, it indicates that major transformation programmes have been delayed, that there are reactive fixes. This is also highlighted in the Home Affairs Select Committee report as well. So have you got a programme grid for change and deliverables to reform technology and transform processes within your department? Or is that an inaccurate review of that internally?
So, short answer, yes, we do have a programme of change for technological change in the Home Office, which goes far beyond asylum.
Is there one specifically for your area of?
Yeah. So there is a thing called the Migration and Borders Transformation Board, which manages our technology change programme for me and for the executive committee in terms of making sure that we are managing within our budget to our timescales and managing the challenges and contention in that. That is for all of migration and borders. So the e-visa and the ETA transformation programme went through that alongside changes we're making to Atlas and everything else.
Okay, because obviously the NO report has said that major transformation programmes is delayed, so it's just interesting that board maybe needs to be held more accountable perhaps.
So I think I would distinguish, so it's worth saying two things. One, a lot of technology programmes were delayed. The closing down of the case information database was later. That was under a programme which is now closed, but closed much later than it intended. Some of that is about tighter portfolio management and project management. Some of that is some of these programmes take quite a long time from inception to completion, and we have seen huge amounts of new change come in and out of the system. So the Illegal Migration Act required a lot of technology change that came into our programme, delayed other programmes, and then was not taken forward because of policy change, quite correctly post the election. So we need to manage these things. Some programmes are delayed, but do we have a system to manage our change? Yes, we do.
Okay, and just lastly, you referenced earlier to an answer to Paul, an external review of contracts in asylum was taking place. Be quite interested to know with whom, when that will be published, and whether we can see that in the public domain. Obviously, I'm reading the Home Affairs Select Committee report onto asylum accommodation. Paragraph 174 says that you've never presented a clear strategy for the long-term delivery of asylum accommodation. Paragraph 175, a senior manager indicated there's never been an overarching strategy telling inspectors it was a culture of just do things. Obviously, that's from a neighbouring committee. Can you tell me what mix of accommodation would you want to see in 5 years' time? Obviously, you want to get rid of hotels, but what is the ideal end point for the Home Office? What mixture do you want to see?
So, I mean, as we have said before, a series of changes over time were made as circumstances changed, and what we want to do now is set out a more sustainable approach. The first thing we need to do in the priority is to come out of hotels, as we have talked about, and the government is crystal clear about that. And we are doing the work, as discussed briefly earlier, beyond that, about precisely what the long-term accommodation model should be, so that we can make sure we get the best support in place, whether that is commercial with private sector providers, with local authorities, or with anybody else. That is work underway. As the Permanent Secretary, I think, told this committee in a previous hearing, we have commissioned a bit of work on commercial procurement from one of the non-executive directors in another department to provide that analysis and assurance to us.
Okay. Just lastly, Mr. Chairman, the reason why I asked that question is in paragraph 25 in the Home Affairs Management of Asylum report, it has done a cost equivalent, comparing hotel costs versus medium and large-scale accommodation, and it has indicated that it is more expensive to be housing individuals in medium and large-scale accommodation if you take in capital costs and other requirements as well. So my question is you've got a savings target, but yet your aspiration, well, I haven't heard actually where you want to be in 5 years, but you want to close hotels, which is aspirational, but you're looking to move them into potentially more expensive accommodation. So I just want to see how this, I'm just trying to square the circle. How are you going to make savings if you're moving people into more expensive accommodation?
So there are a number of ways in which savings can be made, and we are pursuing change in all of these areas as set out in the autumn statement on asylum and return. So we make savings by having fewer people in the system, so kind of less intake, reducing people who come here illegally or who apply for asylum having come here through other means. We need to increase the speed of throughput. That's why we're doing the work we're doing on initial decisions on appeals. We need to increase returns, so we are taking more people out of our accommodation so that we are shrinking the population. That is one way in which we make savings. Second way we make savings is we utilise our estate as efficiently and as effectively as we can. So we increase utilisation rate, we reduce voids, we speed up the time for any how we move people around the estate, which we do, so that we can be as efficient as possible. And then we, as I say, then the other factor is cost per bed, if you like, across the estate. Dispersed accommodation is much cheaper than hotels or large sites. It is possible that large sites could cost as much or conceivably more than some hotels. Those numbers move around, but there are advantages to large sites that might make that a value proposition, and that's the work we will do. But we make the savings through a number of different things, not just through the cost per bed.
Just coming back, Mr. Chairman, if we could just see, you've made a statement there that you're saying hotels are cheaper than large-scale sites.
I said they can.
I'd like to see your evidence base for that, because I understand from the Home Affairs Select Committee report it's the complete opposite. Large-scale sites are much more expensive than hotels. But
it ranges to both, and it depends how long one uses a large site for, how many beds it's. So there are different.
There has been an NAO report which has looked at this, and it did show that large sites proved to be more expensive per head than hotels. Yeah. So surely that's now influencing your thinking and the work you do now.
Two things. So absolutely, those reports influence our thinking. We've learned a whole number of lessons about how we can set up large sites in the most value for money way and avoid some of the long last time round. It is possible. And in some cases, I am sure, some large sites will be more expensive than some hotels.
All the more reason.
That doesn't mean we shouldn't do them. There are lots of advantages.
Getting pretty late.
Yeah, we are. Come on.
We're getting pretty late. I want to bring Rupert in, but can I just have a note on this question? You didn't give a very convincing reply on the attrition rate of your staff at 35% mentioned in Figure 6 in the report. Could we have a note on your retention and recruitment of asylum staff? Thanks very much. Rupert, no.
Thanks, Chairman. It's been a very interesting discussion today, and I just want a very simple question to you collectively, all of you. I mean, given the damage to Britain's local communities of the hotel policy, and given the fact that those people who are being damaged are paying for it, will you collectively, across all departments today, commit to publish more transparently and regularly on the costs around housing tens of thousands of illegal migrants at the taxpayer's expense?
I think those costs are reported through our annual report and accounts. We will continue to report on the cost of the asylum system. We are seeking to bring it down.
I haven't found it to be transparent myself as an MP, so that's been difficult. I mean, we live in a high trust society, and a lot of the people who are coming here are not from high trust societies. So I don't think your short-term reactive fixes are going to work. So we need absolute clarity on what you're doing, and I think we need to reassure the taxpayer that it's being done fast and efficiently.
We're really clear we need to exit hotels. That is the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary have set that out, and that is a priority for us, and we are working to do that. We have a savings target on asylum, and we, as I was just saying to Mr Osborne, we're committed to meeting it.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Rupert and everybody else. This was always going to be a difficult hearing. We are grateful to our witnesses. We weren't necessarily going to get the answers we wanted, and we will look at your evidence very carefully and see where we need to make recommendations in a report. The uncorrected version of the transcript will be available in the next few days. Again, many thanks to all of you. You're all busy people.
I just had a point of clarification, sorry, and this is my fault. But earlier on in the hearing, when I was talking about uplift of fees for immigration legal aid, my team think I might have said for immigration judges. So can I just clarify that?
I didn't hear that, but we'll look at the transcript and make sure it's corrected. Thank you very much for that, Permanent Secretary. Thank you all very much. Order.